Hey, I'm Sarah. Welcome to United Humans, a podcast that goes into the personal lives of our 6,000 plus volunteer medics and their families.
75-year-old male, possible cardiac arrest.
My name is Gabi Friedson.
I'm Dana. This is Ronnie. We're a couple.
I'm Vicky.
United Hatzalah's only mission is saving lives, and we'll discuss how that doesn't leave room for discrimination against color, race, religion, or sexual orientation. As the host of this podcast, Sarah Bachor, I am so happy that you are listening today. Enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe. Welcome back to United Humans, a podcast where we go into the 6,200 medics of United Hatzalah. Sarah Bachor here, and I am really wow, I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, so I'm really, really excited you're here today. Josh Wonder, hello.
Hi.
Do anyone call you the Wonder Man or something?
I think I've heard it all. The Wanderer, the Wonder Man.
Is it Wander,
Wonderful.
Wonder?
So we actually have a Josh Wander club. There's at least three Josh. Well, there's more than three. There are several Josh Wanders in the world. Some of us spell Wander with an A, like myself. Some with a U. Some with an O. One's in Australia. One's New York. One's
no two are alike, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's actually one Josh Wander, W-A-N-D-E-R, that is in the news all the time. I get Google alerts when my name shows up, and he's actually a relative. But
is he more controversial than you?
Well, he was convicted on cocaine trafficking at some point in his youth. He's past that, but now he's like a major funder of. He buys, I think, if I understand correctly, football teams around the world. He goes around the world and buys football teams, and that has its own sports culture and controversy.
Okay, so everyone could go look him up, but he's not the subject of today, unless he becomes United
I was warning them
medic.
that if they look up Josh Wander and find something about cocaine in the back, that's not me. It's a different Josh Wander.
He's not the football purchaser, and he's not the cocaine trader. He is definitely, you could find him on Google, no question about it. He's on the internet. I've known you now for a few years, and I've been following you on your social media platforms. You are quite unique. You are definitely controversial to some, but to others, you're just representing truth. So we're going to get into that soon. Let's just get a little bit of background, where you're from originally. Tell us how you got to Israel with your family.
So when people ask me where I'm from, I'm fond of telling them the story of someone who's buried on our mountain. I live on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And we have a Nobel Prize laureate by the name of Shai Agnon. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And when he went to collect his Nobel Prize from the King of Sweden, he immediately said the blessing that one makes when you see a king, and he translated it, and the king was duly impressed by this. During the dinner, the king comes over to Shai Agnon and says, "Then where are you from?" And without hesitation, he answered that I was born in a small town in Russia, but that was only in a dream. For in reality, I'm from Jerusalem, and I was exiled by Titus 2,000 years ago. So we're all from here. We just got lost in different places. In the exile, I was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. But I've been here on and off for 35 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but you originally were married and you were raising your family in Pittsburgh.
No,
that's wrong. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I came here when I was 17 to
Okay.
Israel. I came here to study in yeshiva. And I basically fell in love with the place and decided to stay. Eventually, I went into the army, also through yeshiva, through the Hesder movement. I got married. I worked in the Knesset for several years. After that, I was the online editor for the Jerusalem Post for several years. And now I'm a United Hatzalah volunteer.
But you skipped a few things.
Just a few things. But I don't think we have time for the whole story.
Let's
you'll have to buy my book for that.
Bit. Oh, you have a book?
No, I don't, but I'm still working on it.
Okay, so when it's written, you'll go read the book and you get all the details. But just bring me back to, because if I say you made Aliyah, you have to explain how that happened. So you were back in Pittsburgh at some point. When was that point that you went back?
Well, first of all, my definition of Aliyah is when a Jew steps off the plane in Israel, regardless of what their passport or identity card says. They've made Aliyah. If they make the mistake of taking the return trip, then they've made Yerida afterwards. But so I made Aliyah when I was 17, even though I didn't officially go through the bureaucracy, the governmental process. It took me a few years. Actually, I made official Aliyah in order to join the army. At the time, that was what was encouraged. So I made Aliyah officially then. And I was married here. I had 3 children here. And then we went back to the States where I did my master's, started my PhD, and ran for mayor of the city of Pittsburgh.
And how many years were you there for?
Approximately a decade, 10
wow.
years. Yeah.
And you were involved in politics?
I've been involved in both countries. I was involved in politics here in Israel, still am, and I was involved in politics in the States. Yeah.
So you were a nominee for mayor?
Mayor of Pittsburgh, yes.
And at what point did that not happen or not evolve, and then soon after that you made Aliyah? Well, you came back again?
It's called a Toshav Chozer. I was a returning citizen.
With your children?
With my wife and now 6 children. 3 children were born in the States.
Got it. Okay, so what year did you come back to Israel?
2013.
And did you move straight to the Mount of Olives?
No. We always tell people the place chose us. We didn't choose it.
I would love to hear, just so we're clear, because people do know the Mount of Olives, and I think they're more familiar as that being a cemetery. So no, he does not live on a cemetery. He lives next to the cemetery. There is a tiny community. Would you like to tell us about it? Because I'm familiar, but I don't think most people even know it exists.
Okay. So first of all, there are 5 thriving Jewish communities on the Mount of Olives today. I live in the largest with about 1,000 Jews called Ma'aleh HaZeitim. In the cemetery, around the cemetery, next to the cemetery, it's a semantics. The truth is that our community were, at one time, that was part of there were 2 sections of the cemetery that was on the ground that we're on now. Under the Ottoman Turks, they banned Jews from being buried further down the mountain, and it remained just an empty, dormant plot for about 100 years until a visionary by the name of Dr. Irving Moshkevitz came along, and he offered to purchase the properties from 2 kolim, one kol Chabad and kol Volin, and to build houses on it. It's an interesting story that the Kol Chabad did not know whether they were allowed to sell the land because the original donors that bought the land put up the money for use as a cemetery, not as a residential use. And so what happened was they wrote a letter to the Rebbe, to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they asked for advice what they should do. And the Rebbe wrote them back that if the original donors put up the money for a Beit HaChaim, which means it's a term for a cemetery, which means the house of life, then probably they would also give it to the living, to the Chaim. And that was their permission to sell the property, and the rest is history today. Like I said, we're a thriving Jewish community on the Mount of Olives.
I mean, most people do not know that existed. When I first met you and you told me about it, I was like, what? I had no idea. So it's pretty cool. And how does that work? Can you tell us in terms of, I mean, I know you don't feel this way, but most people are going to ask the question or think the question. Maybe they're going to be too scared to ask you if they know who you are. But are you scared? What's the safety like?
So, first of all, you don't have to be scared. I don't bite. But, okay, first of all, I get this question all the time. And I have a number of standard answers. My first standard answer is, I don't know what you see when you open up your window in the morning, but we have a beautiful view of the Temple Mount outside of our window. We feel very privileged to live in such a special place in such a special time. I once had a group from Chicago who asked about the dangers of where I lived. I explained to them that there were 160 shootings in one weekend in Chicago. I think that's more shootings than we've had in the entire history of the modern state of Israel. For some reason, they thought where I lived was dangerous. I guess it's a matter of perspective. But that having been said, we host American seminary girls throughout the year. We've hosted over 1,000 girls in our house. And I always tell them that I believe that we live in the safest neighborhood in Jerusalem. I call it a gated community. My oldest son calls it a refugee camp. Again, it's a matter of perspective. But once you're in our gates, we have zero crime. We don't lock the doors. Kids walk around 24 hours a day unsupervised. It's very kibbutz-like. We have security on the outside. Everybody on the inside is armed. So unlike places like Har Nof or Pittsburgh, for that matter, where you can walk into a synagogue and start massacring Jews and they're not aware of the threats, able to deal with them, we're very aware of our threats and able to deal with them.
Wow. That's actually, it really talk about perspective. I think that most people don't think of communities as inclusive. They just are kind of thinking of it as part of the greater location. So no one's going to think of where you live necessarily as like its own yeshuv, but that, East Jerusalem, or, however they're looking at it. So it's a really good point, because when I was in your community, that's exactly how I felt. It was like just, any other yeshuv. But when you look around, you see something different.
I take people every day on tours of the area, and including my community. And I would say 8 out of 10 people that come ask, after they see the community and they go, wow, they ask about apartment prices. So that's
right.
Like their next question, not because they're just curious about real estate in Jerusalem, but because they see the potential and they're interested in living there.
It's a merit. It's a merit to be able to open your window and have that. I mean, what do I see,
That having been said, I must say that I have seen over the years that people that come to our community just for financial reasons, because it is cheaper to live on the eastern side of Jerusalem than the western side, usually don't stay very long. There are some challenges to living where I live, and if you're not there for idealistic reasons, then you're probably not going to stay. Challenges could be anything from the obvious security challenges. We have a very large temporary air population around us that is quite hostile. But besides that, we just live in the center of the world, so we have traffic issues. We have closures all the time, whether it be for one of the 3 major religions' holidays that closes the whole area, or whether it be for a visiting dignitary like a head of state, a president, a prime minister, closes up the whole area. So there's
technical.
Yeah, there are just a lot of challenges to living where we live, and if you're not there for idealistic reasons, you're probably not going to stay very long.
So to say that you're there,
and there is a waiting list to get in, so it's not so easy to get in anyways.
Okay, so that's nice to hear that there's a waiting list. That's impressive. I mean, to say that you're there for idealistic reasons would be an understatement, beyond understatement. Tell us.
I have to mention one more thing.
Okay.
after sorry, I had to interrupt, but when I finished my campaign, the major newspaper in Pittsburgh came to Jerusalem actually to interview me, and they also asked me the question about the dangers of where I lived, and my answer to them, I'm not sure if they published it or not, was that it's not nearly as dangerous as being a Republican in Pittsburgh. So I'm not sure if they actually published that or not.
I'm going to go Google that and see if it's there. That's a very good point. I feel like you're like the master of like one-liners, like touche. So tell me just for a minute, it's so funny because if someone were to be like, okay, what does he do for a living? So I know that you definitely give tours. You're some kind of, is that like one of your businesses or just a side thing? You're constantly giving tours, right?
So if you look at my business card, I have an organization called Bring Them Home, and my title is Redemption Expediter. I take that, I don't just say that as a joke. I think that is really what my role in this world is, to expedite the redemption. Part of that process is a process of education and explaining to people what is happening today in Israel, specifically in Jerusalem, specifically around the old city of Jerusalem. I also have a public relations firm that deals with different projects in and around the old city of Jerusalem. So a lot of my day is speaking to people, explaining to people what the history and what's happening in today here and how it applies to them, especially if they're Jews living abroad.
And Tachlis, how are you making money? Like, is this how you support your family? Because I know that you're on this mission, and it seems like it's a 24/7 job. Is this a way to make a living through this organization that you founded?
So I'm a believer in God, and I believe that all parnasa, all sustenance, comes from God. So I'm not going to say the rest is an illusion, but we have faith in God. I do my hishtadlut, I do my share to bring in the money to pay the rent and everything. And Baruch Hashem, everything is one of the often stated excuses why people don't move to Israel is because it's so difficult to make a living here. And I reject that on many different levels. But one of which is that I actually know people that moved from Pittsburgh to Israel and are making quite a few times what they were making in Pittsburgh here in Israel. So it's something that we we assume that that we need to have a certain job title. We have to be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is, in order to make money. I don't really see it that way. I think that, again, we have to do our part, and thank God I believe that I'm able to fill my role in trying to be a source of education for people, and people pay me for that. I joke around often because I always say that I take people around in my car to the Mount of Olives or wherever it is. And that's just an excuse for me to get them into a locked car so I can explain to them why they don't live in Israel, to give them a rebuke, to give them musar. So I always joke around. I say, I get so many referrals from people, and I'm never sure whether people are referring their friends or their enemies to me. but one way or the other, I get them in the car, and we always have a very interesting conversation about what Jews are doing abroad, what they're doing in America today, and why they're not here and why they should be here.
And what are your platforms for getting these messages out? I mean, I see you on social media. Your posts are very strong, very what some people would call extreme, because there's kind of the way you give this message over is that there isn't any gray, right? People need to be here, period. Now, as a big Zionist and person who made Aliyah and believes everyone should be here, I also understand that there are individuals who can, and I understand those reasons. My mother being an example, someone whose heart is 100% in Israel and can't be here for very, very real and understandable reasons. First of all, let's hear the first answer. What are your platforms? How are you getting this message out besides social media and locking people in your cars? Beware, everybody, if he ever invites you in your car. Right. You are now warned.
So actually, people are warned all the time. I took Ben Shapiro on a tour this week, and I
saw.
And as we were talking, he said he was warned about me. So I guess he already heard beforehand from his handlers that I was going to give him some.
I would love to see the two of you on stage battling any subject.
Well, we actually discussed that at length about the CPAC he had here in Israel, and what I consider to be the most controversial question that he got, which was why he making Aliyah and moving to Israel, and a lot of our discussion revolved around that. But and I can't share it all on this podcast. I'm sorry for not giving you scoops, but it was suffice it to say it was very interesting.
Were you at the show?
I was not at the show. I watched it live on YouTube. I had to be at a different location. Okay. So platforms, I have my organization, which has a website. The website is called itstimetolive.com.
We'll put it in the text under the podcast.
Okay. The organization is called Bring Them Home, itstimetolive.com. We have there hundreds of videos of prominent rabbis, rebbitzins, speaking about the importance of living in Israel today. We have a weekly live radio show on the topic. I have a co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman of Beit Shemesh, and we do a show every week. It's live. We get callers in, and it's recorded afterwards, and it's put on the site. We have a podcast also that deals with these issues and has different prominent rabbis. Until Corona, I used to do a weekly show with Rabbi Nachman Kahana. We hope to restart that soon. But
what's the name of the podcast?
The podcast is Bring Them Home.
Bring Them Home.
Yeah.
Go look it up.
Yeah. And the show, the live show, is called Israel Unplugged. But you can find it all on the website, so it's not a problem to get to. That was your first question. What
So
was your
that's
second question?
so that's like the platform, and then in terms of just people that are following you, I mean, what
I have a lot of
kind
followers on social media personally, nothing to do with all these
Right.
platforms. Joshua Wander on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and
But
all
what's
these other
the
things. And
pushback? I want to hear meaning you're really focusing on controversial points. I know a lot of people are fighting you back and questioning you. You always have an answer. So can you tell me about that in terms of like the support that you've gotten and the people who are like, yeah, you are doing something so important, and the people that are like, dude, lower the dial a little.
So first of all, I don't always have an answer. I always tell people that I'm not a licensed tour guide, so I'm not licensed to make up stories. Having lived in all four quarters and grown up in all four quarters of the Old City, I cringe when I hear some tour guides pass me and say make up stories. I could do a whole podcast just on that subject. Nothing against tour guides. I just, certain ones like making up stories.
Got to make a living.
Yeah. My Rebbe is Rabbi Herschel Schechter, and he has a son, Yami, in Toronto. So his son is fond of saying that he doesn't know anyone in the world that is as wise as his father, and he doesn't know anyone in the world that uses the three words, I don't know, more than his father.
Wow.
So that's not a contradiction. You can say you don't know. I have no problem saying I don't know to things, and I don't know everything for sure. But that having been said, when it comes to Aliyah, I've heard quite a bit. I've been around the world, and I go on speaking tours, and I hear a lot from people around the world, all different excuses. I don't. My position is not exactly what you said it was. I don't think that every Jew has to get up immediately and move
Please
to Israel.
correct me.
In fact, my rabbi himself, Rabbi Herschel Schechter, lives in Washington Heights and does not live in Israel. That having been said, I am here because of him, as well as thousands of his other students. So he's definitely pushing people to come here. On one of my speaking tours, I was in a Chabad community in the United States. We won't mention names. And the Chabad rabbi got a little bit defensive about my words about Aliyah. And afterwards, he got up and he said, my dream is to move to Israel. I would love to move to Israel. But the Rebbe, again referring to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, used to always tell us an analogy, a parable, a mashal. He would say that when a ship is sinking, the last one to get off the ship is the captain of the ship. His job, his role, is to stay behind and make sure that everybody's safe. And he says that we, as shluchim of the Rebbe, that is our job, to be the captains of the ship and to make sure that everyone's safe. So I got up afterwards and I said, Rabbi, I want to commend you and your family on your mesiras nefesh, your willingness and your family's willingness to risk their lives for the greater good of Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people. That having been said, I said the real job of a captain of a ship when the ship is sinking is to get everybody off the ship. I said if you're not getting everybody off the ship, you're really not doing your job. And that's sort of what I was telling Ben Shapiro also, that you have a position of influence that's wonderful and you're doing great work, but meanwhile you need to get people off the ship, because I believe it is a sinking ship.
Absolutely.
And I know that people don't like to compare things to the Holocaust and things like that, but I really think that we're in a unique position that is not so dissimilar to where the Jewish people were in the 1930s. And I believe that Jews that are around the world are in danger and they need to be brought home. I don't think that is the reason people should come to Israel. Meaning, if people are coming here just for negative reasons because they're running away from something, I think that they will probably, if they're coming here because Corona or because anti-Semitism, riots in the street, financial instability, whatever the reasons are, as soon as those issues resolve themselves, should they resolve themselves, they'll be on the next plane back again, because they have to come here for the right reason. Of course, I believe you should come here for any reason, and hopefully we have a rule that mitoch lo lishma balishma, that if you do things even for the wrong reasons, hopefully it'll turn into coming for the real reasons. We have plenty of good reasons, and that's part of our educational system, to say all the good reasons why you should move here. You shouldn't be running away. And the truth is that the majority of the state of Israel, historically, are here because they ran away from somewhere. They ran away from Eastern Europe. They ran away from the Arab countries.
I mean, that is our story.
That is our story. But hopefully, I believe we have evolved over the years, and many of the people that have come here because they've run away from something understand now that this is a place that one should stay for positive reasons.
Okay. So now it's clear. Thank you for clearing that up.
I didn't go into details because again, this is a matter of hundreds and hundreds of shiurim and podcasts. But the Rambam Maimonides says very clearly there are legitimate reasons why a person does not have to live in the state of Israel temporarily. Everybody is supposed to be here in the end. Temporarily, there are reasons why one can not be here. Many of those reasons are misunderstood. That's again part of our education system. The story is told. My rabbi, Rav Schechter, likes to tell of the story that he was once on an airplane in economy class. And somebody, I hope I'm not going to get in trouble by telling the story, but I'm not mentioning names, but somebody from the first class starts walking towards him. He describes him as wearing jeans, a T-shirt, and no socks. And he stops at his seat and he says, Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe. And he says, Aleichem Shalom. He says, you remember me? I was in your shiur so many years ago. He didn't actually remember who it was, but he said, how are things going? What are you up to these days? And this person went on to explain how he and his wife made aliyah, and they were not successful, and now they're in the process of Yeridah, moving back to the United States. So my Rebbe was a little bit shocked. He said, what happened? Why didn't it work out? So he went on to explain that he made aliyah with his wife to the community of Sevion. If those that are not familiar, Sevion is one of the more affluent neighborhoods in Israel. And he and his wife are both radiologists, and they were making a combined salary of $2 million a year in the United States. And they moved to Israel, and they could only make $600,000 a year. So they couldn't make ends meet, and now they're forced to move back. So my Rebbe says he felt so bad for him, he wanted to take $5 out of his pocket so he could buy a pair of socks. But he says, obviously that's not what Maimonides meant. When there is a reason that there is a temporary reason why if somebody cannot make a living in Israel, that they can be outside of the land of Israel. But that's not because instead of making $2 million a year, you're making $600,000. It's understood that there's going to be a lowering of the standard of living on a physical level, even though there's definitely a heightened standard of living on a spiritual level. And if one is in a position where they're going to be living off a charity here, then there is really a reason that one should go make some money and come back, and you wouldn't have to live off a charity. But if, again...
Well, in the same way, I just also, tell me if I'm wrong, but... Isn't there a halacha that if someone is very, very wealthy and they lose all their money, it's the community's job to keep up the standard that they're used to and not just whatever the regular standard is, because that's for them what normal is? So how would you tie that into this story? So that's a halacha in tzedakah. That's not a halacha in where one has to live. But yeah, such a thing exists. Again, right. That doesn't mean that one always has to, and again, I think on a positive note, if you understand all the benefits there are to living in the land of Israel, and those benefits are wide-ranging from the fact that your grandchildren are going to be Jewish because there's a 70 to 90% assimilation rate in the United States, while there's a 4% assimilation rate here. So even if you're completely secular, chances are your grandchildren are going to be Jewish if they're in the state of Israel, and they're not going to be in outside. To all the other benefits of eternal benefits. Well, again, and my organization deals specifically with Orthodox Jews for two reasons. Well, first of all, because I believe that there is a serious lack of education in many Orthodox Jewish communities in the States, more towards the yeshivish/Haredi communities, which I grew up in, so I'm very familiar with. And also, I think that when you're talking about, when I'm speaking to Orthodox Jews, I have a common language that I can speak to them. Right? I can base my arguments in Torah, in the Halacha, while if I'm speaking to somebody who is secular, although I believe all Jews should come here, regardless of their religious affiliation. It's much harder for me to make that sale because I to say the grass is greener over here, that the quality of life is better. But the Jewish Agency and Nefesh B'Nefesh, they've been trying this for many decades now, I believe unsuccessfully, and it's actually sad because Rabbi Fass is one of our followers.
Rabbi, actually, he's a wonderful person. I'm in touch with him, and I highly respect what he's doing. But I think he will be the first to admit that when you have a 3 to 5,000 aliyah, olim per year from the United States, a country of millions of Jews, that it'll take forever for them to at that rate to get the Jews here. So there has to be something else that needs to be done in order to try to encourage them. Again, different people respond differently, and not everybody likes the hard sale that I do. But I think there is a place for what I do. And again, I'm specifically targeting Orthodox communities that are not the Teanex out there, not the communities that the rabbis are always talking about Aliyah, but the communities that like I grew up in, the yeshivas that I grew up in, which never mentioned Aliyah. When I was in high school, I went to high school, I guess I could say in Baltimore in Eretz Israel. I remember as a high school student, maybe 9th, 10th grade, going over to one of the rabbis and saying, "But what about Israel? Why aren't we in Israel?" And I was sat down and explained to how that is not a central issue today for the Jewish people. We need to be learning Torah, and that is not something that I have to worry about. And which I feel, we unfortunately just had the passing of Rabbi Uri Zohar, and he has a book about how he feels, his youth was stolen from him because he grew up in a secular kibbutz here, and he never got to learn all the richness of religious life until later in his life. And I feel that way myself when it comes to the centrality of Israel in Judaism, that was really just a missing part of my upbringing.
I completely relate to that, and I'm so grateful that high school that turned around for me and that I was given an incredible education. It was actually just the shloshim of Rabbi Chaim Wasserman, and I was unfortunately had corona during the shiva, so I wasn't able to go. And
I was at the funeral. Very touching.
I heard the recordings. Unfortunately, I missed the funeral as well. But at the shloshim,
his son is a rabbi in Pittsburgh that's making Aliyah.
Right, I do know that. And I could say that he had such a hand in my education and just wanting to be here amongst many other people. But I'm so grateful that I went to a high school. Shout out to Berea, who definitely encouraged it, and I'm just grateful to be here.
I want to mention something else, just because I mentioned Ner Israel. I ran into the principal, today's principal, the son of Rabbi Tendler, who was my principal, not so long ago here in Jerusalem. And I said to him, when are you moving to Israel? And his response was, "Josh, don't worry about it." He says, "Soon the Goyim are going to throw us out." And I was just incredulously looked at him. I said, "You know that, and you're still there, like that. You're waiting for that to happen." I don't understand. I said, I said back to him, it reminds me of the story that's told of the Hasidic Rebbe that's in a shtetl in Europe, and his followers run into his room and say, "We have to leave, Rebbe, because there's going to be a pogrom soon. They're coming to destroy the shtetl." And the Rebbe says, "My father was beaten up by the Goyim. My grandfather was beaten up by the Goyim. I'm also going to be beaten up by the Goyim," right? That kind of mentality where I just have to stay and just take it.
It's almost like the guy who's drowning, right? The famous Joker story and then God sends a boat and he goes, "No, God will save me." And he sends a plane, "God will save me," and he dies.
And I have a cousin in Baltimore that I always ask her, "When are you moving to Israel?" Because she really always says she wants to move to Israel. And her standard answer is, "Im Yirtzeh Hashem," when God willing. And I said, "Well, God wants. Now, what are you going to do about it?" That's very nice that you're blaming it on God, but it's up to us to make the decision.
Right. I'll just end this topic with this quick thing, which I think is very sweet. That my husband's one of his closest friends recently put on Facebook a picture of him at Ben Gurion Airport, and he didn't say where he was going or whatever. It just it was clear that he was going somewhere. So I wrote him, "Where are you going?" And he wrote back, "Israel, but I'm taking a pit stop in wherever he was going, New York." And I love that mentality that when you're leaving, you're really just coming back. You just needed to make, a stop somewhere.
So I know you want to finish the topic, but I just recently traveled to Switzerland for something. I get around. Let's put it that way. So I was in Switzerland. I actually have a couple of things I just wanted to add to that, because I was just in Ukraine also, which is a great topic also. In Switzerland, I came up with this new custom that I made up for myself. It says by our forefather Jacob, by Yaakov Avinu, that when he left Eretz Yisrael, he had to give up the angels that were protecting him in Eretz Yisrael, were switched with the different angels that were from outside of the land. And when he came back, he got back the angels. So we have a custom, Jews that know that are around the world, on Friday nights we sing the song Shalom Aleichem on Friday night. So I started singing the plain Shalom Aleichem when I came back to Israel. When I left, I said Tzchem L'Shalom because I wanted to greet the new angels. So I said this over on my podcast, and Rabbi Lichtman, who is my co-host, said over a story of Rabbi Nebensolz, the rabbi of the Old City, that he hasn't been out of the country in many, many years, but when he used to travel, so he used to purposely buy the ticket all the way in the back of the plane when he would leave, and all the way in the front of the plane when he would come back. He wanted to be the last one to leave Israel and the first one to come back. So if you understand the significance of even a millisecond more to being in the land of Israel,
that's beautiful.
That having been said, and I was in Switzerland, and I unabashed. My wife says that I am a Gilgul. I am a reincarnation of Ezra and Nehemiah, these people from biblical times that tried to convince all the Jews to come back to Israel. I don't know if I'm that, but I definitely have somewhat of an obsession. But wherever I am, I always ask people when they're coming to Israel. And I was in Switzerland in Geneva. I think I was the first one in the UN ever to get up and say Shvo Chamoscha Lagoyim Asher Lo Yiducha. Okay, well that was another story. But I met a young couple that was on their honeymoon from Manchester, I believe, from England. I think it was Manchester. And I walked over to them. I said, well, when are you moving to Israel? And I was shocked to hear that right after their honeymoon, they're going back to collect their things in England, and then they're moving to Israel to try it out for a year. So I unabashedly, as an unabashed American, sat down at their table. They were a little bit shocked and said, I'd like to give you some advice. I said, I'd like to give you some marriage advice, and I'd like to give you some Eretz Yisrael advice. I said, it's the same advice. I said, if you're coming with the attitude that you're going to try it out for a year, or you're getting married with the attitude that you're going to try it out for a year and see if it works, it probably won't. So you really have to, if you're coming, be committed, go all the way, and understand that you're coming for good, and then I'm sure everything will work out fine.
It's a good message, absolutely, especially for marriage. Yeah. Definitely recommend that. Wow. Okay, we could probably go on and on and on.
I do. That's my podcast. You're welcome to go check out my podcast.
You want to hear more? Go check them out. But I am going to pivot this because this is, at the end of the day, United Hatzalah podcast. So I do want to pivot this conversation a little bit. I mean, I want to hear about all your volunteer work because I know that obviously, how many years are you with United Hatzalah?
So I joined United Hatzalah when I came back to Israel 8 years ago. So it's been 8 years.
8 years. But you were a medic before that?
Correct.
How many years were you a medic?
So I was a medic. Am I allowed to use the other organization's name?
The other organization that must not be
must
we
not
call
be
it Voldemort.
No, well, it was before United Hatzalah existed. So right. So I was a medic through Mogen David Adom, going back almost 25 years. I actually started when I was the online editor for the Jerusalem Post. So this is how I got into the field to begin with. I was very upset about the fact that at the time it was the beginning of the 2000s. And I was very upset by the fact that there were bus bombings across the country, if you remember. I don't know if you were around at the time. And we were, as journalists, showing up at the scene often first, before the first responders were showing up. And we just were able to sit there with our microphones or whatever it was, with our tablets and report what was going on, but we weren't able to help anybody that was at the scene. And I convinced Mogen David Adom to start the first course. I don't know if they did any ones subsequently, but to do a course for journalists. I think this is unique. I don't know if there's anything like this in the world. Specifically for journalists, that they should have basic first aid, that if they were to show up to such a scene, that they would be able to respond and not just report.
It's completely mind-boggling. I've heard you say this before, and I remember having that same feeling of just total shock. How could a journalist get there before a first responder? And the answer is because they were waiting for ambulances, right? Not necessarily first responders.
In some cases it was actually very close again, it depends on where it
Location.
is and the location. Just like United Hatzalah shows up at the scene, whoever the closest first responses are, they go up the scene. So there are journalists that are around. There were actually bus bombings not far from the Jerusalem Post used to be down the block over here. It's not anymore. And there were bus bombings very close to here.
Mm-hmm.
So we were, we just ran out. First ones, yeah.
So, okay, so you became a medic.
So I came back to Israel, right? And a lot of things changed in Israel. But one of the things that changed was United Hatzalah was formed. And I actually knew the founder of United Hatzalah from our childhood.
Ellie?
Ellie.
What?
That's how I got to United Hatzalah.
From your childhood?
Yes. So I went to my first yeshiva in 1987 was in Bayit Vegan.
Oh.
Ellie's from there. And I knew him as a kid. We were friends as a kid. And when I came back to Israel, he said, he knew I was a medic. He said, why don't you join United Hatzalah? So I said, sure, I'll be happy to. I had to retake the course, whatever. But
see that? I knew I'd find out things today I didn't know. That's so interesting.
Right.
So could you tell us about Ellie when he was a kid?
When he was a kid. I probably better not. I don't want to. You have to have too much editing to do. So.
Oh, my. Okay. We'll have that conversation afterwards, off record. Wow. Okay.
He was a unique kid, just like he's a unique adult.
Exactly. Absolutely. What are the other volunteer roles you have? I want to say like fireman or I don't know. I know you do a whole bunch of things. What are the other volunteer roles you play?
Again, am I able to mention other organizations? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I am the commander for Zaka, for the Temple Mount and its surroundings.
Let's tell, just for our audience who don't know what Zaka is.
So Zaka is an organization that deals with...
they show up when we're not successful.
They show up when we're...
Yeah, way of saying that.
I actually often have to change my hat from one to the other. Yeah, that is true. But basically we deal with the respectful burial, collection of remains and burial of people that died from non-natural causes. So not somebody who was sick and died, but somebody who... was involved in all sorts of incidences, whether it be a traffic accident, a suicide, a terrorist attack. They wear yellow jackets, I'm sure, and they also have an international branch which goes around the world and deals with search and rescue. So I've been involved in that also. So I have an intimate family. I grew up in all four quarters of the Old City, and I've lived for the past almost decade on the Mount of Olives, and I have an intimate familiarity with the Temple Mount, which is the center of the world here. And so after the terrorist attack, I'm going to say 6 years ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, on the Temple Mount where there were gunmen that shot and killed and they murdered 2 Israeli police officers. I was called to the scene and again, I responded as a first responder on United Hatzalah. We did whatever we could to save and to treat the people at the scene. But there were people that unfortunately didn't make it. And the terrorists themselves, the terrorist bodies that were there on the Temple Mount. And I was tasked at that point to remove the terrorist bodies from the Temple Mount, which is a whole podcast in itself. What are the Halachic ramifications of ascending to the Temple Mount and its special, unique level of holiness, of Kedusha, and removal of impurities from the Temple Mount. And I went back and forth with Rev. Evansall and other rabbis at the time to discuss this, and eventually they made me the commander because I have this special familiarity with the mount and its unique properties. And I also discussed that at length. But the...
I'm going like 700 tangents.
Right, that's Zaka. I'm also in Yedidim. Yedidim is an organization a great organization, chesed organization that deals with all sorts of people that break down and they need help. They need
their cars. Not emotionally.
Right. Not emotionally.
And I also should a psychological breakdown.
I also have to mention my wife, who is also a volunteer. She is a critical care nurse in Hadassah and Kerem, and she also volunteers and goes out with me often on calls.
Shout out to Tali.
Tali, yes.
Go Tali.
So and my oldest son is actually in pre-med now, so he's
wow.
also going to be going into the And I have my
Wow. oldest
oldest daughter who is now a police officer.
What?
Yeah, believe it or not.
No way.
Yeah, it wasn't my choice, but
Okay.
she is doing her. This is unusual, but there's nothing unusual about my family. She is doing her military service in the police, not border police, but actually police.
Didn't know that was possible.
Right, and it's not people know about the unit. It's called Shacham. And it is a unit people that are doing their military service in the Israeli police. She finished first in her class in shooting, first in her class in Krav Maga and in hand-to-hand combat. So she's a little bit scary, but I don't know where she gets it from. But I'm also a firearms instructor, so my kids have been taught from a young age how to shoot.
Apple doesn't fall from the tree. Wow, what's her name?
Chana.
Chana. Go Chana. That's amazing. Got to get her in this. Wow, that's very cool. So yeah, that pretty much covers like all nonprofit organizations.
There's some others. But let's keep it at that.
Okay, so you have many hats that you wear. Could you
showing a picture?
Oh wow, cool picture.
Yeah.
Very cool picture.
If you see her run the other direction.
So I guess she's really a Wonder Woman.
Yes, she was offered to be part of the anti-terrorist unit in the police and whatever. I'm sure she'll have an interesting future in the Israeli police.
Hashem, she'll be safe and always protecting the people of Israel. We have to come to a close soon, but I want to hear.
I thought we just started.
Can you believe it?
I didn't realize there was a time limit.
We're 45 minutes in. Okay. Felt like 5. I'm really curious to hear specifically. I mean, I get into this with almost every medic, the relationship with, also Muslims who are Israeli citizens, but also Palestinians who are living in Section A that come out of Section A in order to get help from Israelis. I know we did a video a few years ago with you and Monir. That was his name, right?
Yep, my
someone
neighbor.
That you saved, your neighbor, a Muslim, a beautiful movie. Maybe we'll put that link also at the bottom of the text of this podcast. But tell me, what is your relationship like in general with your neighbors, how does that involve your work as a United Hatzalah medic in terms of, I'm sure you get calls, maybe more often, to Muslim homes than Jewish homes. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And that's very accurate. There are many more Muslims than there are Jews in my neighborhood, and most of my calls are to Arab, not necessarily Muslim, Arabs in the neighborhood. So, and often those calls are alongside United Hatzalah members that are also not Jewish, Christian, or Muslim.
You're working with the East Jerusalem branch.
Correct. Both the East Jerusalem branch and the Old City branch. Yeah, both of them. I would have to split this into 2 parts because as far as living where I live amongst, like I said before, a very hostile Arab community that is adamant on getting us what they see as settlers in East Jerusalem or occupied West Bank or whatever the world wants to call it, out of where we are. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, as a responding medic, I have never had a family that has called us not only not deny us access to the call, but we've always been welcomed onto all calls. And I'll say it even further that I have yet to find in years of doing this on many calls any Arab living in East Jerusalem, with one caveat, that has requested to go to an Arab hospital. They always request to go to Shaare Tzedek, to Hadassah, because they know that they're much more professional hospitals and they're going to get much better treatment in the Israeli hospitals. The caveat is when they're wanted terrorists and they don't want to be on the record, so then they choose to go to Al Muqasid or other Arab hospitals that are in the neighborhood, which are much closer, but they definitely are not on par with the Israeli hospitals.
Wow. Okay. But let's be really clear. These people that maybe potentially hate you and want you out, when they have an emergency and you show up at their door, they're welcoming and say, please come help my family member. So all of a sudden...
Always, except for, again, I've never had a problem with the family that's called us. I have had problems in the past with arriving on the scene or leaving a scene from other people. I'm not saying not the family that called us, but other people. There are cases in which ambulances are stoned. There are cases where I've personally been attacked. But the family themselves are always very
in your car
grateful.
Or attacked like outside of your car in the street.
Both.
Wow.
And there have even been times where I have been, I'm not going to use the word rescued, but been helped by Arab United Hatzalah members that were with me, that tried to de-escalate the situation.
And are you very much, meaning you have your gun, you carry that with you at all times, correct?
Correct.
And just by having the United Hatzalah vest or maybe sticker on your car, does that branding say anything to the Muslims when they see that? They go, oh, we recognize that it's United Hatzalah, they're here to help us. Is that recognition established?
I'm not sure how to answer the question. Like I said, they are familiar with United Hatzalah. They're very happy to get assistance from United Hatzalah. But again, there are times when they clearly see United Hatzalah as an Israeli organization and the other organizations. And that's why ambulances get stoned, because they're seeing that as a target, because that is a way of them getting out their frustrations against us evil Israelis. So, yeah, I mean... I'm sure this is probably a better question to ask to them, because they probably have much more mixed feelings than I do in this case.
Well, I feel like the way to combat that is just to education, that, the more they know that not only do we have Arab medics and, many chapters in the country that are completely Arab chapters, but we obviously do not discriminate at all who we're treating. And the more knowledge they have of that information, the more perhaps open and whatever. I think
that it's a conflict that they have amongst themselves, because on one hand they definitely see us as a great asset to their communities. On the other hand, they still recognize that we are an Israeli organization, right? And there are a lot of conflicts within
I see him.
within their community. There are a lot. I'll just give you one example. If you ask any Arab today, a Muslim living in Jerusalem, whether the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, existed, they will deny that to no end. They will say that this is a myth that the Jews made up in order to steal our land, because this is what, at least in the past decades, have been taught. That having been said, if you have ever been through the neighborhood of Vadi Joz, the main street of Vadi Joz's name is El Makdisi, which means the Beit HaMikdash. Right, that's the name of their main street. So, I mean, they have so many conflicts within them that it's probably not easy to identify as an Arab in Israel, because you have all these conflicts. But again, that's a question that you would have to ask them.
Okay. Ramzi will be my next guest if he learns English.
Translate it.
Wow.
Have subtitles.
Are there any parting words? Or, first of all, I think before that, I just want to say that you are quite unique. And that people come here with, a lot of times the guests, they do have a specific thing they want to talk about. I feel like, but it's very specific to a target audience, right? If they're talking about mental illness or they're talking about whatever it might be. But I feel like what your mission is and what you're speaking to is speaking to just millions and millions of Jews in the diaspora. You are such a pioneer in not only making Aliyah and living in, what we'll call, what would be the PC way to say that? You live in, obviously, Israeli
Jerusalem?
Jewish land.
I live in a neighborhood in Jerusalem. What is
it? In a part of Jerusalem that most Jews are not living in. So you are making a statement, as you said it yourself. Okay, that itself, you're a pioneer and a trailblazer on that. And the fact that you are so committed to your job, to your organization, plus a volunteer for all of these organizations, that it's just simply remarkable. I'm not trying to make you blush here, but I hope you take the time to
not blushing.
You know what I mean? I just want you to hear from an objective point of view, this is unbelievable. You are doing incredible work on the behalf of, who am I on the behalf of? Everyone. I want to thank you for all the work you do, your mission in your organization, as well as all the volunteer work and all the organizations that you volunteer in. Just thank you for making the world a better place. Tikkun Olam. It's not simple, and it's very, very, very inspirational. So thank you. Is there any parting words? Are there any parting words you want to share with the audience?
I'll just say that I've said this to many groups before, that if you spoke to somebody a mere 70, 80 years ago and you told them that soon there was going to be a kibbutz galiot, a ingathering of the exiles with millions of Jews back in Israel, that there would be a Binyan Yerushalayim, a bustling city of almost 1 million people, they would look at you like you're insane. Today we're living with these prophecies unfolding before our eyes, and most people are unaware of it, and that's what the Vilna Gaon says on the verse, V'yakir Yosef et echav v'hem lo hikiruhu, that Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. So he explains that in the times of the Geula, in the times of the redemption, that the redemption is going to be unfolding before us, and people are going to be oblivious to it. Indeed, we're living in the times of the redemption, and most people here are not aware of it, let alone abroad, which is unfortunate and part of my mission. For the first time in thousands of years, there are dozens of families of Kohanim that are living in and around the old city of Jerusalem with bigdei kuhuna, the garments worn by in the temple, ready to do the temple service. We have dozens of kohanim, including in our community, that learn kodshim, learn the temple laws in order to instruct them. We have rebuilt all of the kelim, all of the vessels of the temple, with the exception of the one that can't be rebuilt, which is the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron HaBrit, which was put into hiding 30 years before the destruction of the first temple. And for those that need to know where that's at, we know where that's at. We've refounded Chelet. We're in the process of rebreeding the Paraduma, the red heifer. We're light years ahead of where we were just a few years ago, and most people, like I said, even here are not aware of it, let alone abroad. But I think that getting that message out is essential. I'm in the process of writing a book about it called Practical Geula. It's a step-to-step guide to the redemption. And I think getting that message out, especially to these ultra-Orthodox communities around the world, is essential in them understanding that we're living in a different reality today than we have ever had before.
And if people want to learn more, they should buy your book.
Once it's out.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Powerful stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. I really joining me.
Pleasure.
We weren't us. My co-host had a baby. Mazel tov, baby. So, but thank you so much. Really, it's really an honor to have you sitting here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please send us a comment, a review, something that we know that you're listening. And please subscribe and keep listening. Adios.